Welcome to this edition of the Print Page Turner. Today's guest actually doesn't need a lot of introduction when it comes to film reviews and criticism. She's an institution in herself. I'm here to welcome today Anupama Chopra, film journalist, critic, author, and host.
Welcome. Thank you. That's so sweet. Thank you so much.
Anupama, how long did you take to write this book? How many years it has been in the making? And what spurred you to write it now?
Actually, it was an idea that I had been tossing around with my editor at Penguin for a while, that you want to create sort of it's a kind of a listicle, but it's not just a listicle. So it's about people and places and film events that have meant a lot to me. And we were kind of tossing it back and forth. And then we met in February, and in March, the world shut down with COVID. So as it turned out, I had the time to do it, and I wrote it through the many lockdowns. But it was just, the idea was just to talk about things that spark joy in me. Things meaning movie things. So movies and artists and film events like the Cannes Film Festival. Those kind of, that's what I mean when I say things.
Right. So Front Row with Anupama Chopra used to be this go-to for people who wanted to have honest reviews, or they wanted to look at interviews with stalwarts from Indian cinema. And now it has become the Film Companion. It's a show on its own. So what was the story behind the show, Front Row with Anupama Chopra? How did you sort of build it up over time? And is Film Companion just another version of it, or has it come out of Front Row with Anupama Chopra?
God, no, it's not another version of it, because I wish we had the money we had at the Front Row. we had lovely budgets, and we had a standing set at Mehboob Studio, and for 2 years it was remarkable luxury to work like that. So no, Film Companion is not at all Front Row, but yes, Film Companion did come out of Front Row. So when the Front Row sort of contract expired with Star, we wondered, like, what should we do next? The show's done. What do we do? And we thought that the best thing that like what we knew what to do was to create content. Was to create reviews. It was to express opinion, to do interviews. And my husband suggested that then why don't you just do it on digital? Because film reviews should be available whenever people need them. It should not be appointment viewing on television. It should just be literally pick up your phone and see what the review is. And that was really the initial idea. And that's where Film Companion came from. And then just over the last 7 years, it's just grown and become this thing in its own right.
Right. So since you brought up this idea that we have moved to the digital, and now, if I want to watch the review of a film, or I want to learn about the review of a film, I can pick it up from a phone at any point of time. In fact, right now, be it through probably even YouTube channels, or probably even Instagram Reels, or probably tweets, sometimes audience have often become the reviewer now, which is probably not possible a couple of years earlier, right? So what do you think, like, where does the idea of expertise then go? Like, when everybody in a way becomes a reviewer, and I'm not trying to say it in terms of a good or bad thing. What I'm trying to understand is, we used to imagine that there is a level of expertise that comes with whoever is reviewing a film. Yeah. So, what happens to that according to you?
Well, look, the thing is that when it comes to cinema is a very democratic art. Everybody has an opinion, and everyone's opinion, like if it's let's say if it's visual art, or if it's classical music, I cannot have an opinion without understanding the nuances of those things. But the movies, everybody has an opinion on that, right? Social media has also given, like you said, a platform to everyone. So what is the role of the critic anymore? I think the role of the critic is to give you a more informed opinion, to bring to you a take which is slightly more nuanced and sophisticated than this was boring, didn't work for me. Those are the very sort of basic reactions of film goers, and it's fine. But a reviewer should be able to tell you this is why it didn't work for me. You have to present your case like a lawyer. You first say what your case is and then you argue it. So it doesn't matter if you and I agree or not. The point is, can I persuasively give you my point of view? Even though you might have loved the movie and I might have disliked it. So I feel that's what reviewers bring. And really, one of the great things that reviewers can do and should do is champion the smaller stuff, champion the smaller things that maybe the films and the shows that people are not watching and would not normally kind of look at unless they had somebody who they trust guiding them there. So I think we've seen a massive sort of broadening of horizons when it comes to people's palette in the last 2 years. The number of people I know who are now watching Malayalam cinema or Tamil cinema is massive. And I'd like to believe that critics had something to do with that, because we raved and raved and raved. Maybe some people said, "Acha, chalo dekhte hain, kya hai?"
So in your book, you have this set collection of films that you talk about. But I just noticed that you had chosen like these 5 celebrities, as it were. You have Amitabh Bachchan, you have Karan Johar, you have Priyanka Chopra Jonas, you have Diljit Dosanjh, and you have Aditya Chopra. So I was just wondering, what made you choose these 5 people? Because in my head, I'm trying to put them in a category. They sort of don't fit.
No, they're not.
So it's a very eclectic choice. So I was wondering what was the idea.
It is. And honestly, it's, I can't tell you that it was like there was something that ties all of them together. There really isn't. It's more just people who I'm fascinated by. I'm intrigued by, people who have inspired me in some way, whose cinema has inspired me. So it's really that. It's not sort of ki kuch common thread hai between the 5. And the truth is, I was laughing the other day. I was telling somebody that I could do A Place in My Heart number 2, number 3, number 4, because there's so many more people I would love to write about. There's so many more movies that have a place in my heart. So this is just the first.
Okay. So I guess we can wait for a
series. Someday.
So you have been both sort of like an insider and an outsider probably in the industry. Your job as a journalist is something that would probably help you step outside and look into the industry, right, and its workings. And then you've also been a fan of Indian cinema. You begin your introduction by saying that it was 1989 and, you fell in love with cinema and it has remained, and, 25 years into it. And you're also married to a Bollywood director. So these are like, I think, multiple roles or identities that you have right now. So I wanted to know, how do you sort of negotiate or juggle with all of these? And
well, I don't know what the right word is. It is kind of, it is negotiating. It is navigating. It isn't always easy because, when a review isn't favorable, when it is critical, it is hurtful. And I understand that. I have a very keen sense of how much words can hurt and how much work goes into making a film. It's not an easy thing to do. It's very, very tough. I'm very mindful of that. And my effort is to be respectful in my criticism, so that it never comes across as casual, that I just decided to say anything about your work, and that it never comes across as criticism with an agenda. There is no bias to it. But given all that, I feel it's very important for me to be truthful to how I feel about a film. You cannot, if you're not being truthful, then there really isn't much value. Then don't do it, because what's the point? I think it's very, very important to, when it comes down to actually writing that piece, and saying it on camera, when it comes down to that, you've got to be extremely honest with what your response to a film was. You cannot fudge that because so and so is a friend, or Vinod is working with somebody or something. You've got to say what you have to say. And in fact, I take this to be one of the biggest compliments ever. Somebody that Vinod was doing business with said to Vinod that Bhabi ji ka kuch bharosa nahi, wo kuch bhi bol sakti hain. I said, okay, I guess that's a good thing, right? Because if Bhabi ji can't be trusted, then that's a good thing, because they shouldn't be able to predict your response.
Right. So due to COVID and, the whole experience of watching a movie, of course, changed drastically, specifically for a country like India, which loves its movies, which loves its theater halls, right? And it shifted mostly to OTTs, like all of us with lockdown or even otherwise, we were scared of stepping out and halls just reopened, right? So for a significant amount of time, we were all watching stuff on OTT. So how do you think, what has happened to the idea of stardom there? Because we've seen there was a...
Listen, I'll tell you something. I also thought a lot about this, what happens to stardom without the big screen, right? What we've seen in the last 2 years is we've seen streaming stars become massive, Jaideep Ahlawat or Pratik Gandhi or people like Rasika Dugal or people who've done really stellar work on streaming. And I also wondered that does stardom become a little diminished when there's no box office, when there isn't that Friday opening, when the level of your stardom is not established by a 50 crore opening. The fact is, Amir Khan is a star no matter what Thugs of Hindustan did, because Amir Khan got a 51 crore opening for that film. After that, the film didn't work. We understand that. But there were bums on seats on day one. But I just did a conversation with producers, and apparently everybody's salaries have gone up. They said to me that all these actors who haven't had a single release in the last 2 years are now charging much more than they charged 2 years ago. And nobody knows why this is, because ideally stardom should have diminished, but apparently not. Apparently it is as robust, and people are willing to pay even bigger bucks for stars.
So do you think it has, like you said, that there are now people who would probably earlier would not associate with commercial cinema. We would associate them with good cinema or art cinema, but probably would not look at them as commercial actors. And they have been doing well on OTT platforms. Do you think we could say that, then stardom has also slightly become democratized, or maybe OTT?
Oh, it's absolutely, no, stardom has enlarged massively. There isn't that idea, and that had been happening for a while, because you already had the influx of people like Rajkumar and Ayushman and Nawazuddin and Irfan. I mean, these are all massive stars. They didn't become stars through the pandemic. They were all already stars. So that shift had already been happening. But I think what streaming has done is it's thrown up another slew of names who we want to watch, who we love to see. And I think that's wonderful, because there has to be, it can't be these 6 men. Yeah, it can't be, it has to be broader than that.
So again, what word of advice would you have for, let's say, somebody who's an aspiring film journalist? Because often what happens is this profession, or within the profession of journalism, I think people still see that as a softer option as compared to the other beats. Yeah. Or they see the glamour, it's a film journalist and they only have to cover these events, they only have to talk to celebrities, and as if it's not hard work. So I just want to see what you would say to somebody who's starting out and might be facing all of these.
Well, for one, ignore it, because what are you going to do, right? I mean, I when I started 25 years ago, it was even sort of considered kind of like, maybe you were not good enough to do anything else. That's why you're doing film journalism, But the truth is, if it is what drives you, like it was what drove me, I think you have to do it, but you have to bring rigor and you have to bring excellence to it in as much as you can. It is, the problem is that so much of film journalism is actually lifestyle journalism. It's about celebrity lifestyles. It is about what they're wearing, and which is all great. I enjoy it as much as anybody else, but it's not speaking to the film. It's not speaking to the body of work. It's not giving you any insight into how these artists create what they create. So I think if you're going to do this, you have to come to it with seriousness. You cannot come to it thinking, oh, I'm going to hang out with Ranveer and Deepika. That's not going to happen. You're not going to hang out with anyone. You're going to come to it with seriousness. You have to be ready to do your research. You have to be ready to really put in the work. And that's when you'll be a good journalist, and which is true of anything.
Mm-hmm. So what is the most recent film that you've watched, and could you tell us more about that? From across...
The one, I mean, of course, I watched 83 and Atrangi Re, but the one I'd love to talk to people about is Minnal Murali, which is a Malayalam superhero film,
yes,
which is on Netflix. And I would recommend that to everybody because it's a fabulous film about a tailor in a village in Kerala who gets struck by lightning and becomes a superhero, and it's such a wonderful sort of reworking of the tropes of the superhero movie. And obviously we cannot match budgets of Marvel. So what the director Basil has done is kind of go local. So it's a hyper local, very, very moving, homegrown superhero. And he's just wonderful. Tovino Thomas has acted in it. And I would recommend that to everybody.
One of the other films, which is also, I think, my personal favorite, which is why I remembered because you mentioned the word hyper local, is Care of Kancharipalam, which is
I love that.
a wonderful movie, which was, again, it's very hyper local. It's been created out of that place, out of those actors. Could you tell our audience more about that?
It was one of those movies that just catches you by surprise. And those are the best kind of surprises, because I didn't know anything about that film going in. It's an independent film. There weren't any actors you recognize. So you go in completely with a blank slate. There are no preconceived notions or anything, there's no expectations. You're just like, oh, let me check this out. And it was such a beautifully written story. And it's actually 4 love stories, which at the end you figure out how they're all connected. And just, I love the way that the film kind of is talking about love, but it's also giving you so many little insights about women and men, about the equations, about just human beings and relationships. And it's just the most beautiful film that says really, really progressive things. And I recommend it, again, highly, highly recommend it.
So now this is sort of like a trick question though. This, among the films that you have chosen for this place in my heart, do you have any like super favorite out of those? Or because you start with Sholay, which is obviously...
Well, Sholay is sort of the all-time favorite. Sholay is kind of my go-to, so that's like for me, like my all-time kind of gold standard. But other than that, no, there's no like super favorites. I really love all these films.
So this is my last question actually. So you have talked about world cinema, you've talked about regional cinema, you've talked about obviously our biggest industry, which is Bollywood. Do you think like there are still movies or places from which movies you are yet to look at, or you would love to see more of it, or any show, in fact, because since we are talking about OTT has brought up from miniseries to whole
I'd love to see more. I want to watch more Tamil cinema. I haven't seen enough. Definitely want to watch more Bengali and cinema from the Northeast. They're making terrific movies, Village Rock Stars was one of them, Reema Das's film. But there's been so many really, and again, very hyper local stories, very interesting. Amis, there was another Assamese film, really, really kind of, films that are moving out of your notion of what storytelling is, and they're very surprising. And I think there's so much to discover in India, and I just wish I'd started watching these many years ago. I have so much catching up to do. Budapa aa jayega, and I'll still not have watched it all.
But Thank you so much, Anupama, for talking to me. And for me, this is a personal pleasure because I've loved your show.
Thank you.
I have actually gone so much to read your reviews and then decide whether or not I'm going to watch a movie. So this has been an extra special moment for me to be able to
Thank
interview
you.
you.
Thank you so much. Thank you and take care.
Thank you.